Thank you for inviting me here, and since I had the opportunity to listen to yesterday's presentations, at that time I became quite worried that my topic will have nothing in common with the problems and aspects you talked about. But after the presentations, we went to see this exhibition, Kabinetas, curated and presented by Šarūnas Nakas and dailės. And all my worries went away. I realized how much the personality of the author has an impact on how we understand the artworks he creates, and actually that the personality of the author can even make his or her way into the museum or into the literary canon. So I suppose that the term I use, literary biography, may be transformed into cultural biography to avoid this fixation on the field of literature. And then it's cultural biography. It may be useful to discuss relations between the author, his or her so-called personal mythology, and value of his or her works and their place in the field of culture. So I will discuss one particular type of literary biography, that is the biography of Poet-martyr. And in the field of contemporary Lithuanian literature, this literary biography is still the most prestigious, and it's quite a paradoxical situation. The term literary biography is coined by the cultural semiotician Lotman. And according to Lotman, literary biography has very little to do with actual biographical facts of the particular poet or poetess or artist in general. According to Lotman, a life worth of biography is not just any regular life, but a prominent, exceptional life. And here lies the paradox, the prominence must comply with the culture-specific concept of being prominent, and this concept lies in the cultural memory. So, and it is based on so-called models, ideal lives of cultural heroes, canonical authors, even characters from fiction. Like Werther, for example, gave the whole new perspective and life way for young poets. And influence their actions. So, especially the genre of poetry, traditionally defined as based on subjective experience, feelings, etc., obliges the poet or poetess, who are often identified with the lyrical subjects of their works, not only to produce a certain quality of text, but to be a certain quality of persona, to lead a certain quality of life. And this means that if you want to be recognized in the field of literature as a poet or a poetess, you have to lead a certain lifestyle, a life of a poet. And those who live up to these expectations, they may be considered conclusion to the literary canon. Those who don't live up to these expectations, they usually stay in the periphery. So biography of a poet-martyr stems from the concept of romantic hero, an outstanding individual who disregards the rules because of his particular mental structure or restless nature or higher cause understood as a calling, and thus suffers from his own prominence. The distinction results in social alienation. There are ordinary people and there are poets, and poets are not ordinary. They are extraordinary, and that's why people who live up to these ordinary rules, they usually see poets as something not convenient, unconventional. In the first half of the 20th century, this concept in the field of Lithuanian literature was mostly associated with the belief that author, especially a poet, is sacrificing his well-being for some higher purpose. Usually this purpose was to make Lithuanian culture great, to educate Lithuanian people, and so on. While in the second half of the 20th century, the image of poet-martyr opposes the concept of a poet national leader, whose biography focuses more on ideological commitment, righteousness, and while a poet national leader addresses to these big audiences and discuss big subjects, a poet-martyr stays in the periphery, but it's not because he or she is of lesser quality, but because he or she chooses to do so. Because only in the periphery you can speak issues and write texts that can confront these official ideological structures. And despite the fact that in the end of the 20th century, writers have declared dissociation from the romantic author image, literary biographies of alienated, expatriated, insane or shunned authors remain the most popular ones. This phenomenon is definitely impacted by literary history studies and monographies, which are shaping the literary canon in general, as well as giving these canonic biographies, such as exemplary stories of canonic poets and poetesses. Works of once fundamental literary scholars, such as Vytautas Kubilius, Valdemaras Kukulas, Viktorija Daujotytė, are filled with images of poets and poetesses, outsider experience, suffering, inner tragedies, and sorrowful worldview. This sorrowful worldview is a term coined by Kubilius, and he uses this term in describing in his studies almost every poet and poetess of Lithuanian literary canon. In cases of biographies which lack of tragic facts, the author will be most likely presenting as having a general air of tragedy, inner dilemmas which are unexpressed but still somewhere, and so on. Another way of presenting this type of biography would involve highlighting separate details from his or her private life or creative work that has a touch of tragedy, and ignoring other facts that does not have a touch of tragedy. In the turn of the 20th century, the main pretext for suffering for poets was so-called spiritual immigration. It is a very common term in the interviews, in discussions, and the concept of an artist as a lonely outsider is common among poets of different generations. For example, Marcelijus Martinaitis, Nijolė Miliauskaitė, Aidas Marčėnas, Sigitas Parulskis, they all described themselves as lonely outsiders, and it was a very common topic. For example, in his interviews and publications, Sigitas Parulskis often emphasizes the feeling of spiritual exile and estrangement from society and its ordinary rules. The most respected literary biographies for Parulskis were those of Osipas Mandelstammas, Josipas Brodskis, Tomas Venclova, Vytautas Bložė. In other words, the lives of repressed poets who were persecuted by the system. And Parulskis himself was not persecuted or censored in any way. He still discussed the subject as if a poet will always be censored because society doesn't want to accept the truth he is talking, and that's why he will always be a stranger. For example, Nijolė Miliauskaitė presented herself as a lonely outsider, stressing the fact that she's homeless, she has no home. It was like a metaphor, of course, but still the topic was very important for her, and it is one of the most common metaphors in her poetry. The appeal of image of suffering artists is not limited to poets and poetesses in the turn of the 20th century. For example, philosopher Arvydas Šliogeris in his article written in 1995 states, first of all, creative work demands common courage and conscious resolution to become an outsider, a kind of an immigrant or deportee. This deportee would write books that are never going to be published. So in a way, he is led by his creative impulse to make things only for himself, without hopes of recognition, fame, flattery, and even common compassion. And it's paradoxical that such popular and well-acclaimed poets like Marčėnas, Cibarauskė, or Mirauskaitė, in their interviews, they never mention their success. They never talk about the positive reaction they get from the audience. They always concentrate on this feeling of loneliness, of being an outsider, of being a stranger. So in this regard, literary biography of a poet-martyr goes beyond the field of literature, and at that time becomes an imposing image of a culture figure. It is for certain that abundance of suffering and its prominent stereotypes in the self-image of poets were also determined by the narrative of a desperate fight and the moral victory of the loser, which saw its heyday during the Soviet period, although it, of course, has deeper roots in Lithuanian literature. This narrative is based on a story of a protagonist who is usually a member of a tribe, a nation, or a culture on the verge of extinction. And this protagonist decides to reach for the unreachable, unattainable goals, having a clear understanding that he is doomed for defeat. And these are only a few examples, like Juozas Grušas play Kosmantas, written in 1957, Justinas Marcinkevičius, Mindaugas and Cathedra, prose plays, the prose of the silent modernism, for example, Bronis Radzevičius, Tom novel, Priešaušrio vieškeliai, Romualdas Granauskas novella Duonos valgytojai, even a very popular TV series called Tadas Blinda. They all tell the same story about a protagonist who decides to do things knowing that he will be damned and maybe even he will lose his life for it, but he still is desperate to fight. And the deep motivation of these different texts lies in the thesis defeat is noble. It is peculiar that the more developed narrative of prose and plays had significantly lower influence on the self-image of the prose writers themselves than on the poets, for whom the image of an unfortunate one and a failure, the concept of writing poetry as making a sacrifice, is still the sign of a moral resistance and statement of their self-worthiness and singularity. And what is more a paradox is that the image of such a romantic character is still attractive to the generation of poets born during the last decades of the 20th century, and even to poets born after the restoration of independence. For example, today the most acclaimed poet of his generation, Rimvydas Stankevičius, born in 1973, constructs his literary biography stressing on a fatal calling, a turn towards the other side. I will quote a few sentences from his interview given a few years ago, and if you just pay attention to the rhetoric he used, it sounds like coming from the 19th century. So now the quote: "From the early days of my childhood, I have spent my time staring into the other side. It is beyond me. Actually, I have never had a choice. Sometimes I laugh or curse at myself, but such was my entire life. I walk this world, but think about the other." And of course, his poetry is full of images of suffering, of comparing himself as a poet. Lyrical subject is comparing himself with Christ and other figures. Another very popular and well-acclaimed poetess, Giedrė Kazlauskaitė, born in 1980s, is not only a very successful poetess, but the editor of the Popular Culture magazine. But she constructs her literary biography in the same way Stankevičius does. because her literary biography is based on the idea of her living on the outskirts of society. And she arguments that it is because of her unorthodox family, its homosexuality theme. Also, she always, in her poetry and in her interviews, talks about unsuccessful academic career, also inability to communicate with others, etc. So she uses different rhetoric, but the point is almost the same. Although she is very successful in all the spheres, she presents herself as someone who is an outsider. And for example, another very young and already well-acclaimed poet, Aivaras Veiknys, born in 1983, in his poetry, interviews, essays, also highlights childhood traumas, deprivation, and also always brings the fact that a poet is always an outsider, a stranger to ordinary people. So, in conclusion, the literary biography of a poet-martyr in the present field of Lithuanian literature still retains a status of a canonical biography. And the basis for a literary biography of a poet-martyr is, of course, a suffering and estrangement caused either by a fatal calling to steer into the other side, or by childhood traumas, or by spiritual immigration and bohemian lifestyles, because they usually correlate. And the main paradox is that so-called prominent exceptional life of a poet, as we used to think, is almost usually based on a fixed pattern provided by cultural memory. And now thinking about you, because you are not came here to discuss the biography of a poetess and poets, I think it might be interesting to discuss that a similar tendency dominates the self-image of the painters, for example. And does biography have any significance to painters, to exhibition curators, to museum directors, or maybe not so? And if it is so, is the character of painters' biographies similar to the literary biographies of the poets? So, thank you.
Thank you, Virginia. It was very interesting. I was also thinking about those artists, especially contemporary artists, how biography is important. Maybe it was more important like during the Soviet times, really, when it was part of this image of martyr, of resistance. Nowadays, perhaps the connections are more important, like who are your friends, what gang you belong to.
It is important.
So, but of course, biography, I think it attracts, and I think the part of the success, like this huge mass success of Impressionists, is because of the series of romantic biographies by very short. So we will all know what they did and when they did. So. Of course, it's important to construct your own biography. We should try really hard. That's a joke, maybe, but if anybody has questions or comments or want to share experience of constructing biography, maybe Alona will be there. Veikia? Žiūrėkit, aš tik norėjau, labai įdomu, jūs sakot, ieškot paralelių. Ką jūs galvojat apie, tarkime, naujosios medijos ir žiniasklaidos tą biografiją kaip įvaizdį kūrėjo ir kartais kaip įvaizdis, kuris yra sukuriamas viešumoje, gali visiškai nesikoreliuoti su produktu, ta prasme, su jo kūrybinės veiklos rezultatu, nes va tai, apie ką jūs kalbate, yra vienas dalykas, jūs minit tikrai žmonės, kurie veikia, bet biografijos klausimas, jisai gali padėti kurti didelę biografiją be kūrybinio portfelio. Kaip jums tas atrodo iš šiandieninės perspektyvos?
Aš manau, kad čia būtent mūsų gyvenimo... Okay, I can answer in English or in Lithuanian, but I guess there are some people who don't understand Lithuanian, so I will try to explain. In English, I think it's the fact that we are living in this world of social media. This image may be enough for someone to become famous. And you don't have to create art. You can be like an art by your image. Make an art of yourself, and that can be enough. So it's just a different field. In the field of literature, you can still have to produce a certain quality of text. In those like TV shows, you can just show yourself and tell a story about how exceptional you are, and for a while you will be popular.
More questions? Virginia, we still have 3 minutes, so I would like to use the opportunity and to ask you, do you feel there is a difference about creating your own mythology in terms of gender? You mentioned Giedrė Kazlauskaitė and Aivaras Veignys and Rimvydas Stankevičius. Did you notice anything a little bit different? They construct themselves as outsiders, but is there something like more subtle maybe in these constructions?
I think the difference is very small. This is a paradox that, for example, if you think about Lithuanian literary canon, there are only a few women, and there are this very popular type of literature biographies, which for women is impossible. For example, this poet national leader, we have none women with such biographies, and they are only men. And in the field of poetry, man dominates, I guess. That's my opinion. And I guess they give these basic patterns. Women, they try to adapt to them. And some of them, they're quite different, but they didn't quite get into the status of canonical authors. For example, like Neringa Grutytė, her case, few of her first and the second books were very successful, but somehow she just disappeared. Of course, the main reason she doesn't write now and don't produce new books, but still, her attitude was uncommon, and for some critics and even colleagues, poets, she was someone who is just making, I don't know, a joke of herself maybe, because a poet should be serious, should be more dramatic, and if you are just one, you are not a real warrior. You have to have the, I don't know, surrounding for your own personality to become a literary biographer.
That is very interesting, because we have one poetess who is national leader in negative sense, so maybe for women they need to be those, how to say, failure leaders like Salomé Nėris, because there were other writers and poets who, how to say, brought us this son of the Soviet Union, but only she is the one to blame, like in the national scale, like in collective consciousness. So it's interesting to think about all these things. And also, am I right that from my perspective that those men poets, they very often emphasize this also Christian construction based on this suffering of Christ? Somehow I felt that this line is stronger in there maybe.
But it has a very clear connection with this poet-martyr, because the Christ was a martyr and a poet is a martyr. A poet speaks about truth and things that others can't understand. It's quite like normal that a woman poetess cannot compare herself with Christ and with these other big figures For men, it's like already a very big scale of, I don't know, figures with whom they can identify themselves. For women in the field of Lithuanian literature, there are only a few such images. And for example, in Salomea's case, she is not presented as someone who was like a poet, a national leader. She is presented as a dumb and very sensitive woman who was like in love with someone, and just because of that she identified herself for a very short time with those leftists, and like deep in her heart she was only just sensitive and emotional.
Poor woman.
Yeah, poor woman.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I would like